Virgil was a master of poetry and making a good story, but it's not about how good his stories were, it's about what they represented. Virgil was born in 70 BCE in Andis, Italy. Three of his most notable works were the Aeneid, Eclogues, and the Georgics. The reason why he is so notable with scholars is because the Romans viewed most of his works as superb and influenced their culture as a result. According to Robert Derrick Williams, his work was admired by Romans for two main reasons. First, because he was regarded as their own national poet, spokesman of their ideals and achievements. Second, because he seemed to have reached the ultimate perfection in his art. This is saying that Virgil was widely renowned in Rome because his works showed his love for his country, and Rome in particular. In addition, he was a master of formatting a poem and making a good story. A good example of Virgil's patriotism could be found in our Humanistics Traditions book. This provides us with an excerpt from Virgil's Aeneid. This excerpt states, "Remember, Roman, to rule the people under law, to establish the way of peace, to battle down on the haughty, to spare the meek, our fine arts, these are forever." This quote is the reason I believe Virgil exemplifies the characteristics of a genius. This quote brings life into the poem, and to the people reading during this time, they would have thought that these words were not just art, but prophecy. Although Virgil was known to inspire the people of Rome, he had works that showed imperfections within the society. This can be seen within his first major work, the Eclogues, which explored the hardships of the times. Virgil composed his first major work, the Eclogues, to explore pastoral themes rather than epic themes. This poem reflected sorrows of the time. Virgil's poetry was not biased, and because of this, his work seems to have presented his words in a genuine way and given them weight. Moving on to Virgil's life, Virgil's legacy was one shrouded in mystery. Scholars speculate about most of his adult life. All we know for sure is that he left behind some of the best works in history. Biographers try to piece together Virgil's life from his own writings. Without the lavish myths, it turns out that he is no less of a poet. After Virgil's passing, just like any other legend, there were myths that were said about him. They even believed that he had supernatural powers. These were, of course, just myths, but does not take away from his talent as a poet. With that said, Virgil did not just leave great poems, he left pieces of literature that continue to be studied to this day in classrooms and by scholars. Andrew Wallace states that Virgil as a poet whose variety makes him perfectly suited for education. Virgil's variety in this case is the tones and themes in his poems. For example, the Aeneid was a great epic poem to study not only for the history of the time, but also it delves into themes such as the human will and revenge. Although much of Virgil's life is left unknown, he left some of the best pieces of literature to ever grace the earth. Through his literature, we learn of Rome and how everything was back then, and even the history of how Rome was founded during Virgil's life. We also learn about the pinnacle of literature at the time. With all this in mind, we can all agree that Virgil and his works paved the way for how literature evolved and growed over the years to this date.